Welcome back to my channel, Discover Your UK Ancestors. Once you've delved into a few generations of your ancestors, you'll begin to notice that all the boys are named William or Thomas, and all the girls are named Mary or Elizabeth. I'm slightly joking, of course, but you may be starting to think that parents had no imagination. This isn't the case at all, and in actual fact there was an established naming pattern that many families followed, maybe not 100% of the time, but usually with some consistency. In this video, I'm going to talk about the social norm that existed from the 1700s through to the early 1900s, relating to how parents named their children. This traditional naming pattern was the social standard, and its purpose was to honour ancestors and preserve family lines. It seems even our ancestors from 300 years ago were thinking of us family historians. As a result, there was a common sequence for naming children, which went like this. Now, I've attempted to put this into a diagram, so I hope you get the gist of what I'm trying to explain. To keep the diagram from being too busy, I've only put in the arrows for the first two sons and the first two daughters, but I'm sure you'll be able to follow it through. So the first son was named after the paternal grandfather. In this example, that's James. The second was named after the maternal grandfather, Thomas. The third was named after the father, so that's William. And the fourth was named after the father's eldest brother, John. Exactly the same principle was followed for daughters, except the mother's side took precedence. So the first daughter was named after the maternal grandmother, that's Elizabeth. The second was named after the paternal grandmother, Grace. The third was named after the mother, so that's Mary. And the fourth was named after the mother's eldest sister, Hannah. Now, although this naming convention was a social norm, it wasn't followed 100% of the time, but it is a reasonable starting point to expand your research. Even if families didn't follow this pattern exactly, it would be unusual if you didn't find at least some family names amongst the children. This tradition explains why certain names reappear constantly across generations. As an example, in my family, I have 4 generations of men who have Gabriel either as a first or middle name. I think this is a lovely name, and it's great for me as the family historian, as it's a little unusual and therefore easier to research. If you think that 200 years ago it wouldn't be uncommon for a couple to have, say, 6 surviving children, maybe more, if all those children got married and had children of their own, there would be more Jameses, Thomases, Elizabeths and Grace than you could keep track of. It's really important to be aware of this because when you're looking for birth, marriage or death records, it's all too easy to find the record of who you think is your James or Elizabeth because they have the right surname and they live in the right area and the dates are good, only to find you've got the record of another family member, a niece or nephew, for example. Also, be aware that if a child died, especially as an infant, it wasn't uncommon for their name to be reused either, with the next born son or daughter or even later on. Many babies did not survive infancy, and just because the eldest son that you found is named James, you cannot make the assumption that you found the paternal grandfather's name. As always with family research, you must check and double check. Something else that you may come across is the inclusion of the mother's or grandmother's maiden name. This was done occasionally to ensure the maternal family name continued. Finding this is a real bonus for the family historian as it confirms or not that you have the right family. I have a couple of instances of this in my family. One, for example, is a daughter born in 1825 named Deborah Pierce Wills, with Pierce being her mother's maiden name. I'm sure this family were thinking of me 200 years ahead and wondering how they could help. Keep in mind that in the 1700s and 1800s, a large percentage of the population were illiterate, and many lived their lives not too far from where they were born. Outside the names of their family and people near to where they lived, the only other names they came across were those read aloud in church, names like James, John, Sarah and Rebecca. The list of baby names that we have now just didn't exist, and the desire to name their children something a little bit different didn't really exist either, certainly not like today. In Ireland, some Catholic families would name their babies after whatever saint's feast day was closest to the birth. Protestants stuck with apostles and Old Testament heroes, and for non-conformist families, names like Faith and Charity became popular. Some parents continued the naming theme down through subsequent children, naming them after other older brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, etc. But of course there were other families who defied tradition altogether and named their children after possibly close friends, public figures, royalty, or just because they liked the name. Towards the beginning of the 20th century, Victorians began breaking the traditional patterns. Literacy rates had improved, people started to move away from their place of birth, and their horizons were suddenly opened up. The middle class grew, and they drew inspiration from names from literature and flowers. Patriotic names such as Victoria and Albert gained enthusiasm, and as the decades rolled on and radio and television were invented, the traditional family naming pattern had lost much of its shine. If you keep your family tree on one of the web-based platforms such as Ancestry or Find My Past, you may find they give you hints to suggest who they believe may be your direct ancestors. These hints are a great resource but should be treated with caution, and you absolutely must do your own research to verify they are accurate before accepting them and adding them to your tree. I suggest you also add TBC next to the surname until you have really satisfied yourself that the hint is correct. You can find the birth or baptism records, and from 1841 onwards you can look at the census returns for added fact-checking. If the hints suggest names that you have not come across in your family, you should be particularly cautious. I always like to end my videos with my top 3 tips, so for this episode I'll leave you with tip number 1, use a traditional naming pattern as a starting point, but don't be afraid to abandon it if it becomes clear your ancestors were simply doing their own thing. Tip number 2, look out for middle names which could tell you the mother's or grandmother's maiden name. And tip number 3, treat hints suggested by online platforms with caution until you have checked them thoroughly. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and share it with your friends. If you hit the subscribe button, you'll be notified when I post the next video. And if you have any questions about naming patterns, or you want to tell me about a subject that you'd like me to cover, please add it to the comments. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.